Hello and welcome to Blackmans Bay Studios, and in the latest of our minisodes, a slight departure, Keith.
Yes, we're going to, funny enough, we're going to talk about us. We're going to call this one Living in the Cray. And we've spoken about, lots of people around the Cray area, bandballs of Rick Woods and Kenny and, Barry Wheeler, so all sorts of people. Yeah. So we thought we'd just take a step back and have a talk about what some of the things that we did down in the Cray. And look, let's face it, the Facebook page has been absolutely brilliant with photos, with videos, with stories. Not that Mick would know anything about that, of course, because he ain't a member, is he?
No.
I'm still working on him, but he's still a bit. He's still refuses to go, so all the stuff that's on the site will just go over his head. But anyway, we're contributing to it. And Mick, what's the earliest recollections of the Cray, Mick?
Well, I think we were lucky. Overall, I think we were very, very lucky to be born in St Paul's Cray and raised in St Paul's Cray. It was a fantastic place to grow up in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah. It was a standout area, wasn't it?
Yeah, my mum and dad moved in 1948, and just recently I was talking to one of my sisters about it, and my mum and dad had two viewings available to them, one in this place called St Paul's Cray and another in a place called Loughton in Essex, and they come down by train to St Paul's Cray first, and my sister told me that my mum was walking around the house in tears because it was a proper house, proper garden, proper bathroom, proper kitchen. This is someone that's been bombed by Hitler, and I bet most of the people that moved to St Paul's Cray, St Mary Cray, Foots Cray, were in the same boat, Keith.
Yeah, and look, what was unique about the Cray, as if you're from the Cray, you already know, but you moving out north, you had houses, and you're into the urban environment. 5 minutes away, you're in the country.
Yeah.
And we had all of that fantastic countryside as our playground in essence,
Yeah.
But the Cray had everything, didn't it? I mean, the schools, the amount of schools that the place had was unbelievable at that time, And I went to Gray's Farm. Mick went to Midfield.
Yeah.
I went to Gray's Farm Instance and Gray's Farm Juniors, and Mick was there at
Midfield Infants,
yeah.
Midfield Junior and Midfield Secondary Modern, so pretty straightforward.
That's right, yeah. And Midfield Secondary Modern was, I thought it was a great school. It obviously had its problems. You had some sadistic bastards who were some of the teachers, but all in all, it was actually quite a good school. I mean, I think we mentioned this before. Well, I have certainly. If you lived on the Cray, there's certain things you had to do, didn't you? As kids, you had to do it. You had to go and over the woods, where the old people's home is now. You had to climb the king and queen tree.
Yep.
You had to go scrumping. I mean, it was almost like it was mandatory, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You had to. As soon as you got given a new woolly jumper, you used to go, yes, tuck it into your belt, and you were straight up there. Next thing you know, the whole thing's all baggy around there,
Because we've got to think, I mean, where I lived in Grovelands Road, over the back of our garden, you had the school playing fields where you could play football and cricket. Sometimes the caretaker would chuck you out, but not very often. Then you had Scabbery, where you could go up the woods, you could go scrumping. You had Petswood, you had the woods up where the old people's home is now. You had Sidcup Park over the other side.
Little bike ride down to Ainsford.
It was a great place to grow up. I feel very lucky, and I've sort of realised it as I've got older. Just when I see how much the baby boomers have been vilified, that we've covered that in another video, but I think we were very, very lucky.
So do I. I mean, I look at some of the photos that the people have been putting up, and there's about 3 or 4 blokes put photos up on a regular basis, and and they're just fantastic. There's places that they put photos up that I've never even seen.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
especially around St Mary Cray. You know, some of the old walks around St Mary Cray. I've never been there, and it's actually fascinating to see it.
Yeah.
You know, from my perspective. You know, there's been a couple of drone shots. You know, it's remarkable what a sort of green area the Crays are. You know,
that's what I mean. It was a great place to grow up.
Yeah.
So all you people that put all those photographs, thanks very much. It's brought back some fabulous memories for both of us and our families. You know,
and the stories. I mean, you know, we've said, we mentioned it before. You know, if you lived on the Cray and you were anybody on the Cray, you knew someone that could get stuff bent off the docks, right? All except Mick, right? And Mick's old man was a docker, but he would have been the only docker in the London pool that never nicked anything, wouldn't he?
Yeah. Now, Keith's always pulling my leg because his dad was a lorry driver, my dad was a docker, and dockers ate lorry drivers, and lorry drivers ate dockers, and Keith's dad never loved to have a go about my dad to me, and I used to tell my dad, and he always thought it was hilarious.
Yeah.
But I sort of, as I've got older, I get it now. I get what my mum and dad were doing, because my dad come from the East End of London. Growing up in the 20s in the East End was a hell of a tough place to grow up, as was a lot of other places, let's not forget. But the East End was particularly tough. Him and his brothers had a real tough time. My mum, not so bad, she was from Bermondsey, but they didn't want their children to grow up in an environment that they grew up in, and I get it now. And we had great laughs with Keith's dad when he was slagging my dad off, and my dad thought it was hilarious. But so Keith's never forgotten that. But
see, we're living in an era where your parents did what they had to do to get by. You know. Now, everybody I knew, certainly up Breakspears. You know, Breakspears was the street for all of the big families.
Yeah.
You know, well, not all of them, but for quite a few of them. And everybody cracked the electrical box. You know, you know, they were all getting free electric. You know, whether it's a darning needle or we're breaking the seal and moving the bit of what's name over.
Yeah.
You know, wherever you could do, you did it. Whether it was fixing a gas meter so that you could get free gas. You know, I reckon those electric blokes would look at the Breakspears and say, how comes, you know, this is the middle of winter and you're not using any electric, you know, up that street. Yeah, it was. Or when they come to empty the meter, you know, and all they would give you back a coin, you know, like the old tin boxes, you know, we used to cut the lids out of baked bean tins and you get all of them back. And I think, you know, you've done all that. How did you survive on, you know, 50 bob's worth of electric for the whole of the winter, you know? Yeah. And not only that, I mean, you look at the, you know, we mentioned about Annie McFall. You know, if you wanted anything, you went to Annie McFall, Mick, you know? You know, all except your mum. You know.
No, well, my mum was friends with Annie McFall, and she worked in Woolworths, and she'd come home and she'd say, "Oh, Annie McFall came in today." She always used to do that. She knew Annie well, but she couldn't understand the way, she couldn't get a grasp on the way she used to carry on.
She was the fence, certainly for the St Paul's Cray area. Yeah. No doubt about that. You know. You wanted anything, wallop, she was in there, you know. And you got Sid, the old man, had to have a little dib. My old man was the greatest thief I think I've ever seen, you know. My old man was fantastic, you know. You know, he had a load of electric drills that he took to court for. And these electric drills had serial numbers on them and all that. And they couldn't find out where they came from. He was not guilty, you know. So, yeah.
But not only that, remember, St Paul's Cray, St Mary Cray, Foots Cray, when they built these places, they built everything that you needed there. Shops and schools. Like I never left St Paul's Cray when going to school, nor did you, Keith, did you?
No.
So, no. And we wound up where we met at Midfield Secondary School, didn't we? 800 boys there, and by the way, Jeremy Beadle did not go to Midfield Secondary School. Let's get that clear.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Apparently, in his autobiography, he said, because he lived in Blythe Hill, he reckoned that Midfield Secondary School was a grim, rough school. Well, I would dispute that. I thought it was a good school, give you a good, solid education. There was some tough blokes there. Don't let's forget that.
Yeah.
But he wasn't allowed to go there because he was deemed to be too disruptive.
Yeah.
Now
he'd have got slaughtered there.
This is a school with travellers and tough guys there. There's no way he'd have been very, very quiet, wouldn't he?
He'd have got slaughtered down there at midfielder without a doubt. You know, he wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes.
I think he was just trying to toughen his image up, wasn't he?
Yeah. There's you know, the school itself. You know, and I think you've mentioned it, Mick, that all of the kids we went to school with, when we left school, apart from a few of the blokes who lived in our area, you never ever saw them again, did you?
No, it's as though they walked out those gates and disappeared off the face of the earth, didn't they?
You know, a lot of them would just think, you know, you would bump into them, wouldn't you? I mean, you used to bump into the odd one here and there, but you'd think, well, the amount of kids at the school, you'd bump into, but no, you know.
Well, law of averages, if you go in pubs, clubs, you know, you go to sporting, you know, you expect to see people. We just didn't.
No, just got like they just appeared off the face of the earth. You know, we used to get down the old youth club playing table tennis, didn't we?
Yeah.
I mean, we were fanatics when we were at school, and just after we left school, up until really we got into the senior sort of divisions, and then sort of lost its charm a bit.
Yeah.
Mostly because we started getting whacked, but you know.
Yeah, but also we started meeting women on a serious basis, didn't we?
Well, some of us, you know, but it wasn't just that. But there was other things to do when you know, we used to go down the Iron Curtain Club, and we'd get up Noel Rise Youth Club, and we'd be everywhere. You know, there was a youth club that me and Dave Fawn used to go to at Sidcup at the back of Sidcup, you know.
Yeah.
And but that was when we was probably 13. We used to go over there, you know. And again, like Noel Rise, we used to go to, and places like that. So there was a lot to do, wasn't there? We never bored, was it?
No, there was a lot to do. It was a nice place to live, a nice place to grow up. The people that I come into contact with in Grosvenor Road were all nice people, good kids to knock about with as a young kid, and I'm very, very lucky, I feel.
Yeah, and I think that there was so much. You know, so much to do back in them days for us, and then you compare it today, which all those things are still available, and yet kids seem to be getting bored, don't they?
Well, they're just sitting in front of some electronic device, aren't they? That's all they can go see farther than that.
Yeah, but if they're outside, they're spending all their pocket money on spray cans, and you know, they've got a, you know. I mean, and you know, let's be fair. It was a tough area to live in, and with those photos that people have been putting up around the Cray, they have tidied that place right up, especially the River Cray.
Yeah.
You know, because the River Cray did start to get a bit polluted back in the sort of 70s and 80s, and they've cleaned it right. It's actually beautiful there now, especially you know that bit down by the paper mills and running from the brook. Yeah. You know, that was always all right, but it seems to be now it's actually a river again, you know.
Yeah, that's good.
It looks absolutely beautiful. Some of the videos, the water's crystal clear.
Yeah,
you know,
good.
You know, so and some of the and that whole area actually down there has actually been sort of rejuvenated. You know, it looks actually beautiful. You know, all around the bottom of Star Lane and all around there, it looks absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, good.
Compared to what it was like when we were there. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's about it, Mick.
Yes, I think it is.
Us living in the Cray, doing our bit, weren't we?
Yeah,
you know,
a trip down memory lane there.
Yeah.
So if you were born in St Paul's Cray, St Mary Cray, Foots Cray, I think you can really understand what we're getting at here. It was a lovely place to grow up in the 50s and 60s and in the 70s.
Yeah.
We don't know what it's like now, though, do we? It might still be lovely. We don't know. perhaps some people can give us their opinions on what they think, what it's like now.
Well, one of the things that got me is that when I got married and moved away, and then I had an occasion I had to drive up Breakspear's Drive, and I couldn't believe how narrow the road looked.
Yeah.
You know, now we're talking in a time that there was virtually nothing parked in that street. We used to play 4 games of football up the street. You know, especially around that corner of where Giggs Hill was. You know, that was our football ground. And if we had to stop the game during a game, you know, if we had to stop it twice, we was unlucky.
Yeah.
You know, and I could hardly drive down there. The amount of cars down there, and wasn't that? It was just that how narrow the streets looked. I remember them as a kid. You know, back in the I remember them being a lot wider. You know, just I suppose it's all perception. And
I've got a picture of Groveland's Road where I was born, and the photograph was taken 6 months before I was born.
Yeah.
And you can see that, I think there's 1 car in the photograph.
Mm. Yeah. The only things that used to be parked in Breakspear's Drive was my old man's lorry. You know, yeah. Ronnie Osborne had a motor, and occasionally Sidney McFall used to park his lorry on the hill there. Obviously, wrong way round, facing down the hill, in case he had to do a bump start in the mornings, like, you know.
Yeah.
And it was also handy if he parked, you know, with his back facing the other end. You know, the stuff could be very easily got out the back of the lorry, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Like me.
Yeah. Silly McFall.
Yeah, God, I've been it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for watching. Hope you and we'll see you again. I think we've got another couple of little minisodes in the pipeline, haven't we?
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.